In August 1996, Tamara Proservina, an old woman from the Russian village of Keolinovi, started hearing strange voices in her head telling her to go to a nearby cemetery. When she arrived there, she saw huge eyes staring at her from the nearest grave mound. She approached the grave and saw a creature about a foot tall. Its head looked as though it was composed of 5 petals and was shaped like an onion. It had no ears but had huge, slanted cat-like eyes occupying most of its face, and it was alive. It whistled to her to draw her nearer. She brought the creature home and examined it further. It was plump and swayed like jelly. Its skin was gray with spots, and it breathed through a small, flat nose. It had long fingers with sharp claws, no genitals, and no navel. Tamara began feeding the creature caramel candy and milk. She began calling it Alashenka and claiming that it was her child. Eventually, the other villagers discovered Alashenka and called the psychiatric hospital. Alashenka starved to death while Tamara was in the hospital. Eventually, a friend of Tamara's, Vladimir, checked in on Tamara's home and found Alashenka's mummified corpse. Alashenka was then taken by a mysterious organization called the Star Academy. The lead investigator of this organization claims that while driving with Alashenka, her car was stopped by a flying saucer, and the aliens within demanded the return of their comrade. Tamara was killed in 1999 when she wandered onto a highway in an attempt to escape the psychiatric hospital. Welcome to Mind the Gap. I'm Keegan Gwydolin.
And I'm Mackie Drew.
And thanks for joining us. Today, our show is all about aliens and alien abductions. The story you just heard about Alashenka may have actually had some truth to it. The creature may have actually existed, but a doctor from a local hospital said that it resembled a 20 to 25 week human fetus. Geneticists at the Moscow Vavilov Institute of General Genetics performed DNA analysis of the clothes the creature was wrapped in and revealed no evidence that it was alien. And in 2004, scientists announced that it was a premature female human infant with severe deformities caused by something called the Kishtim disaster of 1957, which contaminated the area with radiation. This is the most recent and widely believed account of an alien presence, the one that most recently claimed to have actual physical corpse of an alien.
Now, see, I've never heard of this. So, is it really that widespread?
Well, I mean, there's a whole sub-community of this sort of thing, and, researching for this show, I was looking into it, and I kept seeing Alashenka. Kept being brought up, and so I looked into it, and that's what this is. It's apparently something that was very startling and...
Okay, so when you say these subcultures, you're talking about the people who are like, well, this is... aliens are all around us, and they're coming to steal our whatever, Like, is that what you're talking about?
Of
or
course.
Are we talking about skeptics? Or
Oh, no. The sort of abduction... People who think they've been abducted, UFO conspiracy theorists, and the like. So... that's the, I guess, most recent and widespread among that subculture.
Okay, that's fair. I think ET is probably more widespread in our subgroup.
Well,
so
I don't think anyone thinks that's historical or documentary.
Well, it's got just as much proof. I want to talk about like real abductions. Not an alien coming here and being abducted by us, so to speak, but, the classic's tale. You get captured in a ship and
sure,
you're shown around and they somehow tell you that you're special because, you rock and you were the one that was abducted. That kind of classic situation. But first I want to talk about how to avoid getting abducted.
Sounds good.
So
this is a public service announcement now.
So yeah, there has actually been in the 1950s when the alien abduction stories started to get so popular, a lot of insurance companies were offering plans. You know, they were offering insurance not to get like, or if in the case of an abduction, they would pay out certain amounts of money.
Oh gosh.
Anywhere from $10,000 to $10 million per person. You know, per abduction.
It's like the Family Guy cloud insurance thing.
Yeah, or volcano insurance in Chicago,
insurance.
and
Yeah.
yeah. So, which is a real thing too, by the way. Volcano insurance.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, if you were in,
it makes
Hawaii,
sense. Yeah, it makes sense in some places, but
yeah. But yeah, I was looking into some of the most prolific buyers of abduction insurance, and the Heaven's Gate religious group came up. You know, the cult group. They're infamous for their mass suicides.
oh, is this the orange tang people?
This is not the Kool-Aid people, but this is a similar group. And they thought that their bodies were vehicles and that the aliens were coming to abduct them, whatnot. And for whatever reason, they got alien abduction insurance for their 50 members, and that cost them $10,000 to get
Each?
and no, for their whole 50 members.
Well, that's not bad.
Yeah, and it was a $10 million plan. So, yeah, so that's kind of cool. You know,
Yeah.
they got that. So this was a money maker for somebody at least.
So I'm wondering, how do you, like, if like, say you get insurance and I'm your family and you get so-called abducted, how do I claim that?
Now, see, most abduction stories actually end with a person returning.
Ah.
So you'd claim that. And I don't know how you'd prove that. I looked heavily into that. And the only person to ever pay out on an alien abduction insurance claim was a Florida company, which I will not name here, that has paid out twice. And they admit to this, and they stick by this, but they will not give any details on how they vetted these processes. So
That's interesting.
I can't imagine why they would. You know, they should be skeptical. Anybody could claim this.
Of course. That's what I'm saying. It's like that could be an easy moneymaker. Just get you some alien abduction insurance, wait like a year and a bit, and then, oh, I was abducted.
You got to be in an abduction-rich area, you know, farmland, lots of cows.
Of course.
But yeah, so that's
Weird
a good
land
way you
formations.
can insulate yourself from abductions. Make sure to get the alien abduction insurance. Needless to say, it's fallen out of favor.
Yeah, well, I mean, there hasn't been a lot of talk of alien abductions recently, you know?
Yeah, it was a 50s thing for sure.
Yeah, and I think the most recent iteration of the whole alien thing in terms of pop culture was the X-Files, which was back in the 90s.
Yeah, you know, there is a lot of stuff in the 90s about abductions, but most of the classic stuff comes from the 50s. You know, 1954 or 1957 was around when they were supposed to have, like, the first abduction stories. There's a bit of leeway on when it actually started.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, before that, there were plenty of paleo abductions, which basically means it doesn't follow the classic 1950s and beyond storyline for the abduction, which includes a capture, an examination, a conference, sort of like when they talk to you, usually telepathically, a tour where they show you around the ship, a loss of time, then you return. And then there's usually some component of, like, the aliens were benevolent, they were nice to you, they meant only good, and then there's the aftermath, they were getting therapy or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's the classic points to hit when you're in an abduction story. But before that, there's at least two great cases of an abduction being in pop culture. So, like in 1923, Charles Fort, an author, wrote a book called New Lands, and it suggested that like extraterrestrial beings would fly around stealing humans, and that was just basic stuff. But I found
Just stealing them?
Stealing humans, yeah. It suggested that they might be stealing it.
All right.
And it was actually it was supposed to be nonfiction, so that's yeah. So and a published story in 1897 talked about two men who were just walking across the road, and they found a big metal object in a field, and these white, like really tall, very skinny, white, like long white-haired beings were standing there, captured these men, brought them into the ship. The ship was not in flight. It didn't fly off, but then they were able to fight their way free. And that is nothing like the abduction stories that you'd see nowadays or in the 50s. It's why, how could that be? There are these advanced aliens, whatever. They weren't really thinking of that. This was just probably a funny story they were telling, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, throughout like the zeitgeist of culture, you'd find as like culture progresses, so do the alien stories. The aliens visiting us apparently care what our culture says about them. So the if we're thinking Greys would come, the classic,
yep, of
bulb-headed, skinny, short fellows with
large
big eyes.
Yep.
Yeah, they if we start to think those are abducting us, more people will see them. So we can see that throughout the years, and before the Greys were dead set staple of abduction, you'd find like we talked about, the white hairy hair covered men, and
yep.
You'd hear talk about like blob aliens, where they're just a big slug or something like that.
Yep.
And I saw one talking about 100-eye pink alien creatures.
Oh yeah, and it gets crazy, and it's fed by media and stuff that's going into the culture. Like, I'm sure something like The War of the Worlds, the 1898 science fiction novel by H.G. Wells. I'm sure that brought a huge influx of alien sightings and claims and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, probably. I mean, once you've got that in everybody's head, then they're probably like all scared of it. Some people who aren't quite stable may start thinking that they're always being influenced by these aliens that they've now just heard of.
Yeah.
But yeah, the predominant Grey view, like the Greys, what we were talking about, you see that constantly now. They were in X-Files, like you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
They're even in South Park and the movie Paul a few years ago.
Oh yes, of course. I love that movie.
Yeah, that's a great movie. Really funny.
Yeah.
I saw people walk out of the theater on that one for their religious stuff.
Oh really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Anyway, well, I assumed it was right at the anti-religious part, and then they walked off. So, I mean, it could have been a coincidence, but it was quite a sloth of them. But yeah, so Dr. Stephen Novella, the neurologist, he actually has something to say about the Greys and why we have chosen the Greys as the classic view.
Interesting.
And here's a quote from him. The aliens, however, do not appear as humans. They appear like humans with those traits we psychologically associate with intelligence. So, a diminished physical strength,
yep.
like with a thinness and
large
shortness.
head, large eyes.
Yeah. So, you see things, and we always give them powers, telepathy and whatever.
Obviously advanced technology. That's the one, I guess, underlying common thread throughout all alien abduction stories, and I guess all alien stories, is that they're always highly advanced technology. They're always better than us.
Yeah, I plan to talk about this a little bit later, but it's kind of a necessity when you think about it, right?
Oh yes.
How could they get here?
We'll get into that. But what's interesting to me is, like, people know this. People know that they have to have highly advanced technology, and yet they don't question, like, why the aliens are doing this. You know what I mean? It's like, to me, if I was a highly advanced alien, I don't know why I would, travel across light years, hundreds of light years, millions of light years maybe, and, just start abducting random humans. Don't you think you'd do something a little more targeted?
Like, there's a few reasons I came up with why they might want to. They may want to gather resources, or
from humans, though.
Yeah, no, well, like we have a whole big rock here with a whole bunch of minerals on it and water.
Well,
they don't want us.
Well, but that's my question. It's like, why would they be abducting humans? Why wouldn't they?
Oh, I see. Not just visiting. I thought you were just talking about visiting.
No. I mean, I can see, resources, water, whatever.
Yeah.
But why would they abduct, random humans? You just sort of walking through a dark forest at night.
I was watching Third Rock from the Sun earlier, and they seem pretty interested in how we interact. Did you see that show?
I have seen it a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. It's really campy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But even so, interaction. I mean, why would you only abduct one person? That's the other thing.
Yeah.
There's very rarely corroborating accounts of people being abducted at the same time into
You
the
mean,
same
like-
ship, like together.
Oh, I see.
At least I haven't come across any.
I didn't come across too many of those. The first one we saw was two guys that fought their way out of
Yes, of
an
course.
alien spaceship. But I mean, yeah, you don't really see it too often. It's usually that slightly mentally unstable fellow that everybody knows and people are generally concerned for, but really don't do anything about it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I mean, the best reason, I suppose, I think a good reason why you wouldn't see a lot of these aliens coming and abducting us is because, well, like Stephen Hawking was talking about in his 2010 series, the Into the Universe, the controversial statements he made. Do you recall those?
I don't.
The ones where he was talking about how he's fairly certain that if aliens were to visit us, that they would.
Oh, I see. That
they would want to take our resources
and stuff.
and,
Yeah.
war, whatnot, all that jazz.
See, I don't know if I agree with that either. Because
I don't know either. It's hard to make a call about what the motivations of creatures on
exactly.
other planets would be.
Hypothetical creatures.
But, I can see where he's coming from it, because when you think about, well, our only sample size for life right now is Earth. That's all we've got to see. But you've got to. There are some things that are constant between worlds. It's likely that they would be carbon based, because that's the only chemistry that really works other than silicone based life.
Yep.
They've got
as
the
far
same
as we
graph.
know, though. I mean, that's with our current understanding of biology. We could be totally off.
Yeah, but why do we even discuss this if we don't want to discuss what we know now?
Fair enough.
And I mean, they've got the same gravity works on their world, and the same chemistry works in their world. So we likely see some form of natural selection, resource gathering.
Yep.
The same sort of things that drive us to conquer and war. And
See, here's the two ways I could agree with the conqueror type thing. I could see them wanting to conquer Earth for A, the planet itself as a whole, or B, in order to get us, the humans, the life. Because it seems to me that, any resources that Earth may hold, be it water, gold, any metals, anything.
yeah,
There's just massive more amounts of it in space floating around.
you know what they don't have out in space, though?
Any asteroid and grab, all the metals you want, and they're way easier to get at.
You think it'd be easier? I mean, you can set up
Yeah.
a mining camp here or something. Like you can.
That's true, but you could also, if an alien race can travel across millions of light years, they can set up, an asteroid mining camp, and that thing would be basically a, cubic kilometers worth of pure iron ore.
Pure iron ore, eh?
You wouldn't, yeah.
Okay.
You wouldn't have to get through, the humans and then the undergrowth and all the other life and whatever else may be
Okay,
contaminated.
well, one thing we haven't maybe talked about is the fact that it's maybe they're bored.
Yes, that's a possibility as well.
Like, we do things that don't make sense all the
Yeah,
time.
just-
Why
just
would we
for
play a
sport,
video
like
game?
like a predator type thing?
Yeah,
You just hunt humans for sport? That could
exactly.
Be, that could be the case.
Most things humans do isn't for a goal. It's just to, either just pass time or, deal with our boredom.
It's true.
So I don't think that it's necessarily like they need motivation, but I think the clincher here is that they have assuming they have heavily limited resources. Why would they put all those resources into just abducting one human and then probing him or whatever?
Yes, that's
showing him
true.
around the ship.
That's
Why would
true.
they care?
Yep. Well, I'd like to talk about why, not so much why aliens would hypothetically do this, but why people believe in aliens to begin with.
Okay.
So I think, like most sort of woo that we come across, it's an
Sorry,
easy.
can you describe woo for the
Yes,
listeners?
of course. Like most conspiracy theories and stuff like that, I would even put religion into this in certain contexts. It's an easy explanation for phenomena that are difficult to understand or explain superficially. You don't understand why you saw this blinding light and you lost some time So you make up the story. It's like, oh, aliens must have abducted me, especially if you just read War of the Worlds or saw an alien movie or something like that. Whereas the reality may be that you just passed out. You know, you got some tunnel vision, you fell over, and you lost time that way. You know, it's an easy explanation for something that you don't understand. What do you think of that one to start off with, Mackie?
What do you think? Just because it's an easy or a more interesting explanation for something that might have been otherwise boring or unexplainable to you?
That, or also it may be a preferable alternative. You know, maybe someone doesn't want to admit that they passed out and they want to invent something a little more befitting of their idea of themselves.
I could see somebody doing that. I wouldn't do that, but
no, I know. Another one is the emotional appeals, because people tend to cling to experience that they have heightened emotional states in. So when you're afraid, you cling to those emotional states. You remember those things more clearly. You perceive to have remembered them more clearly. It's like the flashbulb memories that you talk about. Have you heard of flashbulb memories, Mackie?
Flashbulb memories, like
the psychological phenomenon where, say, for instance, the classic experiment, I believe, was they went around and asked people, where were you when the Challenger shuttle exploded?
Yes.
And
okay,
a lot of people were very emotionally shaken by this, and they gave, it was a really emotional time, and they're like, oh yeah, I was here. I remember it so clearly. It's like a picture burned into my memory. And then they go back to them like 5-10 years later. They ask them the same thing. Do you remember where you were when the Challenger exploded? And they give the same explanation. They say, oh, yeah, I mean, I was so shocked. It's burned into my memory. And they give a totally different explanation of where they were.
Wow. Okay.
So
see, that wasn't what I think it was. I remember a similar situation with events that were... a study found that with events that were like traumatizing like that, but not necessarily directly to the person, they would describe events in detail and they'd go over them. But when they went back to fact check them with like loved ones or through other evidences, they found that the more certain they were that their memory was true, the less likely it was that they were telling the truth.
Yeah, same sort of thing. So it's this psychological phenomenon that occurs when you have had a heightened emotional state, and you believe you've formed these memories that turn out to be untrue. They're not true memories, even though you perceive them as the clearest of your memories. So it's the exact same phenomenon, just temporally displaced in my Challenger example.
Okay.
Yeah. You kind of alluded to another potential explanation of why you would believe that you were abducted. It's simply because you want to, Someone may have had an experience that they initially attribute to aliens, and their conviction gets stronger and stronger the more they're challenged, because that belief begins to define them. It's like a similar phenomenon to when people start defining themselves by a disease that they carry.
Yes. I survived cancer, and that's all they ever discuss.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
I suffer from AIDS, and they become, that it's like, oh, I'm so strong because I'm fighting AIDS. I'm the guy who's surviving AIDS. And then it's like, oh no, you didn't have AIDS, and people get really upset with that. It's like they had taken that on as part of their identity. So a similar thing happens, and there's another alien abduction story I read in which a woman claimed to have been abducted, and she was interviewed a whole bunch of times and started being challenged on some of her facts. And the more she was challenged, the more staunchly she would defend her position. She started out with like, oh, I don't know, maybe it was like this, or maybe it was like this. And then she just got more and more certain and claiming certainty, almost as if she was trying to convince, herself more than anyone else.
I can get that. Yeah, just like trying to, be like spiteful. Like you're being challenged, so you want to reinforce it. I don't know why we do that as
it's a human
species.
Thing. Yeah.
But that seems like such a counterproductive way to do things. But I guess that's just how it is. I can see the same thing happening with some like fairly religious people. You know, they're very...
Yes, absolutely. One of the other explanations of why people might believe in aliens is that I know personally a couple of people who this seems to be their primary reason, is that there's dramatic superficial evidence. So, you know, you see a weird YouTube video or read a story, and it's presented to you as evidence for alien abduction, and it's very shocking and dramatic, and you know, that's all you see. You don't stop and think critically about what else it could be. Maybe that's not even the conclusion you would reach were you to come across this evidence without the setup that this is an alien abduction, you know, evidence for aliens or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I remember watching the Cloverfield. You know that movie?
Yes, of course.
Cloverfield. They had a trailer. It was sort of a viral marketing campaign, one of the first. And they had released a video about this like weird like moving slime in like New York City subways, something like that. And everybody was freaking out, saying it was aliens, and that was kind of presented in a way where it was supposed to be taken as aliens.
Yeah.
So I saw everybody freak out right away.
Yeah, it's funny. You know, people just accept. They sort of just jump to the first conclusion that is presented to them, and they stick to it.
Well, yeah, or for instance, people like to accept evidence that already concludes the beliefs that they have. So there's also a form of confirmation bias there, but more so, I think it's a bit of lumping. So when I was talking to a fellow the other day, he was a big conspiracy theorist. You know, he was talking about like, this is the Illuminati, blah blah blah, cover up. You know, the old that old shtick. But then he was believing in that aliens were also abducting people, but the government was covering up. And I was like, oh, why do you think they were covering up? And he was like, well, don't you think the government covers things up? And I was like, I mean, mate, I don't understand. You know, like I don't know how that follows.
Yeah, exactly. It's faulty reasoning.
Yeah, so somebody came to him one time. He's already believing that the government's doing all these crazy things, and then somebody says to him, "Oh, hey, so aliens, blah blah blah," and he's like, he's hearing this. Oh, the government's doing something I don't like. Well, therefore,
yep,
it's true. So I think that's a big thing we see a lot of times as well.
Yeah,
so.
Of course, and you know, sort of on a tangent to that, people also will see alien abduction or the presence of aliens as, you know, a way to pull together any perceived mysteries that there are. So, like, if you see any confidential military operation, they'll be like, oh, they're covering up an alien landing. Whereas, you know, there could be separate explanations for each event, but people like to have this all-encompassing theory that pulls together all these mysteries and solves them all.
Intellectual panacea.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well. So, I mean, we've already sort of discussed this, but I'd like to talk about why we think that these abductions don't happen. Because, I mean, if you've been listening for the last 27 minutes, you've known that we clearly don't believe that aliens are coming and abducting people.
Yeah, we're not very tactful about that.
No. So, so I wanted to talk about some of the best reasons we've got why we don't think it's happening.
Sure.
First off, the null hypothesis. So what that is that we don't accept anything until the default answer is addressed, which the default answer for any claim would be that it doesn't happen. So, you know, we just need to see some evidence first. Show us some evidence, and then we'll take a look into the claim. You know, if there's not enough evidence to say that this did happen, then it's not been proven yet, and therefore it hasn't happened.
Right.
It's not that you flip a coin and say, oh, there's a 50-50 chance. It's either happening or it's not. There's a certain burden of proof that comes with making any claim, and the bigger the claim, the more evidence you need to provide for us to believe.
Right. And see, the issue is there's a lot of so-called evidence out there. People will say, oh no, see, look at this video. It's evident. Look at this person's, you know, eyewitness account. That's evidence. It's like,
yeah,
there's a quality of evidence that you have to meet, a standard of proof.
Yeah, what they're looking at is anecdotal evidence, you know, and those can be changed for so many reasons. We've already talked about the cultural aspect of the anecdotal evidence. You know, these stories are influenced by culture.
And
there's
the memories,
bias.
yes, like we were saying with the flashbulb memories as well. Someone could just be misremembering it. They could honestly believe that they remember something happening, and it could not have occurred at all.
Yeah, there's total, like, there's psychological effects that cause this. There's problems in perceiving these events. There's problems in processing, storing the memory.
Yep.
There's problems or telling other people, and you could come into a game of telephone at that point. It gets inflated and inflated.
Yeah, and there's a million reasons why an anecdote could be wrong. So you need something a little more concrete than an anecdote,
Yeah, we have to use Occam's razor in that case. These are really far-fetched stories.
Yeah.
There's no reason the aliens would want to abduct people. There's no reason to think, we haven't seen anything like this, so there's no reason to think that that's the be-all end explanation for this. And there are simpler explanations. Either people could be lying, like we not necessarily. They could truly believe it. It could be a delusion.
Yep.
It could be just a misperception.
Yeah. They could
but
be
it could also just
lying.
be them
They could be
lying.
wrong.
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Yeah, and it's not that we don't think there could be aliens out there. I mean, it's a huge universe. There may be aliens, but we don't think there's a good reason for them to visit us. They may not even be able to visit us.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that a little bit later in the episode. But for every phenomenon that's attributed to aliens, there's almost certainly an alternative explanation that's simpler and conforms to Occam's razor much, much better than the alien explanation. So the main method that's been used and iconically cited by many, many people for analyzing whether or not life could exist elsewhere in the universe is known as the Drake equation. And this is what legitimizes this organization that we'll talk about called SETI, or the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Their efforts to reach out to alien civilizations is based on this hypothetical equation that gives us the likelihood of alien life existing somewhere in the universe. So the first thing that we need to talk about is the equation itself. And I'll just break it down for you. So the number of civilizations that we could potentially contact is equal to the number of habitable planets times the number of those planets, the frequency of life arising on those planets, times the frequency of a civilization arising from that life on those planets, times the frequency of the civilizations of the life of those planets that is currently existing. So all in all, you're calculating what percentage of the planets that exist would have a civilization that's evolved and able to talk back to us that exists currently, so that we could actually communicate with them.
Okay, so this is just talking about, it's basically a list of variables we need to deal with. It doesn't give us anything because it's,
right. That's exactly.
It's all unknowns.
Right. So we are just now getting the number of habitable planets. Up until even 10 years ago, exoplanets, or planets outside of the solar system, we thought they would exist, but we didn't have any evidence of them. However, with recent satellites like Kepler, we have seen that there are literally innumerable planets. There are
literally innumerable.
Yes, literally innumerable.
All right.
More planets than stars exist, and trillions of stars exist. That's trillion with a T. So, I mean,
I've actually got a number for that if you'd like.
Yeah, sure.
9 times 10 to the power of 30. So that's 9 with 30 zeros. That's how many stars we estimate in the observable universe.
Right. And if we think about our star as, a pseudo-typical star, which it's not, it's actually a lower than typical star, then we have 9 planets. So, 8 planets, I guess. And one that could have life, maybe 2 that could have life. And then you multiply that by the number of stars that exist. If there are 8 planets and one of those planets has the ability to sustain life on each of those trillions of stars, Or maybe it's not, all of them. Maybe it's half of them. You still have half 9 times 10 to the 30.
And our methods for detecting planets is still very rudimentary. I have a number for the number of planets that we're able to detect on the stars right now.
Sure.
And we can only detect 0.47% of the planets around these stars.
And that's just based on the methods of observation that we have available to us.
Exactly. Yeah. So it has to line up perfectly with the sun. If there's any abnormalities to the planets at all, then we wouldn't be able to detect them.
Right.
And scientists believe beyond even these stars and the planets orbiting them, there's even more rogue planets, which may or may not have some way to have life on them.
Well, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that.
Yeah. So these planets, or a rogue planet being any planet that's not attached to a star. So it's believed that there is more of those than planets orbiting stars.
All right.
Yeah.
I'd like to go through the Drake equation just a little bit more. So,
sure.
We've touched on the number of planets, so we also have to take into account the number of those that are habitable. Because, you can't really have life as we know it, at least, on a gas giant like Jupiter or Saturn. You need a terrestrial planet. And the consensus is that there is what's known as a Goldilocks zone, that where water is liquid. Water is considered a very important part of astrobiology. It's like if you're looking for life, you want to look for a place with liquid water on its surface. And we sit right on the inside of our Goldilocks zone, and Mars sits right on the outside of it. So, Mars and Earth are pretty close to each other in that respect. So you have to look at the habitability of the planets that we're talking about. You also have to look at the frequency of the life, which varies, whether we estimate the likelihood of life arising. If you say that life will always arise whenever possible, then your frequency is going to be closer to 1. But we know that it's non-zero because life has arisen at least once on Earth.
Yeah, but it might be very very close to 0.
Yeah, it could be.
The problem here is we got a sample size of 1.
Exactly. And so we're working on that.
We're trying to extrapolate here. Again, the information we have here is not great. We are working with this is like sticks and stones. Yeah. We're not working with the best technology here. Astrobiology isn't it? It's
Stone Age technology for astrobiology.
Mm-hmm. We can only expect better improvements, but as far as we know now, this is kind of the odds what we were looking for life, and it's looking pretty good.
Well, there's no my background is in biology, and I've never heard a reason why that would prevent life from arising when it's possible.
Yeah, well, it seems actually pretty easy as long as the conditions are right?
That's exactly it.
It should happen, right? Well, we both know the processes that go into abiogenesis, non-living matter turning into living matter.
Absolutely.
And it's pretty easy. It's actually not a tough process to go through. And once you've got that going, once you've got something that self-replicates, so evolution takes over and complicated life comes right out of that.
Yeah, it only takes a couple billion years.
Yeah, so if we can talk about which ones turn into civilized planets, then we...
Yeah, and so in terms of the Drake equation, the civilized planets is a little bit, debatable. In the Drake equation, it's defined by the capability to use interstellar communications, like radio transmitters and telescopes. So...
That's super debatable.
Yes, exactly. There's some bias in that notion, but the underlying reasoning, I think, is quite sound. And the idea is that radio is a very...
simple tool.
Yeah, exactly. It's a relatively easy tool.
I just think it's kind of funny where these guys operating a radio telescope sitting around saying, well, who are the civilized people in the universe? Well, obviously the ones with the radios.
Yes, exactly. But, it's also, they're building in a bit of pragmatism. Because you're not going to contact... people say, oh, Rome was such a great civilization. They didn't have radio telescopes. How could you say they're not a civilization? It's like, Well, maybe they were a civilization. You want to count that, that's fine, but we couldn't contact Rome. An alien civilization wouldn't be able to contact Rome and have messages sent to them without going there themselves. So if we're talking about contacting long distance remotely, they need to have radio communication or some kind of, light speed communication.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I completely disagree, obviously, with the idea that you need the communication to have a civilized planet, but...
Well, what would you say?
I kind of think you just need to have a functioning and technologically advancing people. So, if you were to have, everybody getting along and everybody doing stuff, but they're really working on carrot technology, I would count that as civilized, as long as everybody's in on it.
That's fair enough. Like I said, I think it's really just an issue of the practicality they're looking at.
Oh, no, I completely agree. I'm just being...
facetious?
Facetious, there you go.
Yeah. And, of course, the last variable is the frequency of the planets that have civilizations that currently exist. And there we have to look at the expanse of time a little bit, It's like our universe is 14 billion years old. And it took us, about 4 billion years after our planet was formed to evolve to this state. So there's a lot of time that's passed and a lot of time that is yet to pass before the universe finishes its rounds and stuff, before the universe is finished. That's maybe the lowest. I would ballpark the lowest frequency on the frequency of civilizations that exist presently. It's just, I think that's the biggest needle in the haystack. What do you think?
I think so too. When you even look at humans, we've been working on humans for a few billion years now.
Yeah.
And it's only recently that we figured out the radios. So,
yeah, exactly. We've had them for 50, maybe 100 years?
Something like that. And we really, how long will we be around? If we're around for another billion years, maybe we've got a chance, but... if we nuclear war ourselves or whatever, we just run out of resources. Doesn't have to be catastrophic.
Exactly.
But then maybe we won't make it to contact something else. And the same thing could be said of any other civilization. Mm-hmm. I think civilizations are, in their infancy at least, are generally volatile and
yes, agreed.
Tend to implode. So we'll see.
So that's the... Drake equation, and that's, it gives us an idea of the possibility of real aliens existing. But that doesn't tell us anything about, where they are or whether they will contact us. However, there are some real possibilities of life within our solar system. Not at another star, not another galaxy, but, in our galactic backyard. So the possibilities for life in our solar system, the most obvious one is Mars. And this is what was, this is where life was in the War of the Worlds. And, back in the 1800s, it was a commonly accepted fact that there were Martian civilizations just a world away, thanks to the War of the Worlds. But, at this point, we're fairly certain that no civilizations have ever existed there based on all the probes and stuff we've sent. But, back in the 1800s, if you went up to someone and asked them, they would say that, yep, there's aliens and they're on Mars. So the first attempts to search for life on Mars were the Viking landers of 76, which looked at chemical changes that are caused by life to try to detect whether life was ever present there. Now, see, the biggest problem with life on Mars is that right now, Mars has no magnetic field to protect from cosmic rays, which may have destroyed any life that once existed. So the way that works is, the Earth, we have a core, a highly magnetic core. And because
it's magnetic because it's hot, right?
Yeah, and it's moving. So this core is still molten, and because it's moving, it creates this magnetic field around Earth that deflects particles shooting towards us from the sun. Mars, on the other hand, being smaller, it cooled off much more quickly. And so its core is now solid, which means that it has no magnetic field and therefore no protection from cosmic rays.
Okay, well, I know about a certain fungus that grows on the Chernobyl reactor, despite it sending out huge gamma rays. Why can't they survive a simple little bit of solar radiation?
Well, I mean, it's I'd say the difference there is that there was life was allowed to evolve without the radiation in your fungus case.
I see. So you're saying it's because it was already complicated enough to deal with the situation. The simple life in the beginning couldn't have come up with something so unique.
That's what I would think. Or at least it was in an unstable state. I mean, we can see from the surface of Mars that it looks like there weren't any civilizations there, which means that they probably didn't have any means of complicated life. By any stretch, we wouldn't call it complex life. If they had microbial life, I would say that it's probably not, it doesn't have the mechanisms that you would need to survive and evolve quickly enough to deal with cosmic radiation.
Yeah, I know that the fungus uses, it processes that it gained through endosymbiosis, which is something that took a long time on Earth to develop.
Yes, absolutely.
So that could be a key there.
Yeah. So the last thing about Mars is that there's lots of evidence of past water there, which is why it seems like such a good candidate to us. We've seen fairly recently that more and more evidence of streams and riverbeds and that sort of thing, and that was one of our markers of a habitable planet, which is why we like to look there. So, we may find microbes frozen in ice or under the surface or something like that someday, but it's by no means, what you think of when you think of aliens. Now, the other main possibility for life in our solar system is Europa, which is one of Jupiter's moons. And we have good reason to think that it has a liquid water ocean underneath an icy crust, and it's heated by what are called tidal forces. So basically, because Jupiter is so large, it squishes and expands the moon as the moon orbits. And this squishing and expanding heats the core, and it heats the planet due to friction and, torsion and all those forces. They impart a great deal of heat, enough to melt the ocean underneath this icy crust. And this gives us a lot of stuff. Now it has its own energy source. There's a lot of possibility there. We could have something far greater than microscopic life.
And you're missing the main point we talked about the last time. The giant ice sheet gives great protection for the radiation.
Too. And of course, also the fact that it's far, far further from the sun than Mars is.
To say the least.
Yeah, a great deal further than Mars. So that's also protection. So you could have far greater than microscopic life, although it's probably still small and primitive due to the low, relatively low energy you get from tidal heating, as opposed to the sun, which imparts a great deal of energy to us.
So it'd be slow life, and it probably couldn't do anything with electricity either if it was all water-based.
That's true. We're not looking for a civilization here. When I'm talking about these possibilities, I'm talking about anything that we would identify as alive on another planet.
I've always imagined. I've known about Europa for a while now. Like I've dreamt about it. I've wanted there to be life. I've wanted a mission to go there.
Yeah.
Have you heard about the NASA mission that they had planned but never did?
I actually heard that it's moving forward. I thought they were going to launch something soon.
Good news.
I think they're trying to find a way to cut through the ice. I heard that's the problem.
Oh, really? Well, I have a solution, and it came from NASA. Basically, the idea is to put a small nuclear reactor on a small submarine, and the idea is to melt through.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Clever, right?
Yeah.
So you basically just land this thing on the surface, and and the nuclear reactor that's powering it lets it melt through the ice down to the core, and then hopefully it doesn't hit any ice volcanoes, which are a thing there, mind you. Yeah, and then it'll get to go down and see what I imagine will be lots of squids.
Cool.
I always imagined it's squids.
Yeah, me too, actually.
I don't know why.
Or some sort of weird fish creature, you know?
You know what? I always had great respect for cephalopods, and I think I want more of them to exist.
I agree.
And I want them to be dominant. But I don't want to give up my position either.
Yeah, just give them another planet.
There you go. So yeah, how's do you have any information on any of the other places in the solar system?
You know, there's not a lot other than that. Those are two main things. But Io, there are some similar suspicions. Same as Europa, it's a moon of Jupiter, and again, tidal heating acts on this and produces constant volcanic activity. It's a very, very vicious and dramatic and violent surface that you see. And people are like, oh, it's too violent for life. But there are isolated pockets where there's a lot of heat there, and that's the main issue, where the energy is coming from. Right, that's what you need. Apart from that, we've got Saturn's moon Titan, which is possibility because it has liquid methane or ethane, which, we were talking about liquid water. And the whole reason you want liquid water is so that you have some sort of suspension for nutrients and all that sort of thing to move around. You can't really suspend it in air. And
dry chemistry is not too conducive to life.
Exactly. So you need some sort of liquid. And the presence of liquid methane and ethane on Titan is given a little bit, There's not a lot of hope there, but it's a possibility.
I think it's a stretch. I'm still hoping for Europa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want there to be life on other planets, so Europa's the first.
Yeah. So those are our biggest concerns about our cosmic backyard.
Yeah.
Beyond that, we have no idea.
Well, yes, I do.
Oh, there we go.
I actually I looked into things that are extrasolar possibilities. So the things outside of our solar system. So I wanted to discuss things, some of our top candidates that Kepler has helped us find. Primarily, the exoplanet finder that you talked about earlier.
Absolutely.
Another one I've been excited for a while. I was in class when I found out. I think I was in physics. Regardless, but it was so exciting because my teacher was so excited about it as well. Gliese 581 is a star, right? It's a red dwarf.
Yep.
And it's about 20 light years away, so it's not actually that far in terms of the stars go. But it actually has 3 possibilities for habitable planets. So Gliese 581c, Gliese 581d, and Gliese 581g, very inventive names.
Fantastic.
Where all have the possibility for life, some more so than others. D is interesting because it's the most likely because it's warm enough to have liquid water, and it's got regions of it where there's ice as well. Mm-hmm. And it's large enough to facilitate greenhouse gases, so we can hold on to heat. Yes. That's one of the main things that keeps Earth going, right? We don't lose all our heat every night. We lose a large portion of our heat every night. Yep. We don't lose all our heat every night, right?
Yep.
That's why it gets colder at night, right?
Yep. I have a little bit of a factoid. If I remember correctly, if Earth didn't have any greenhouse gases, the average temperature would still be livable, but it would be a chilly, I think it was around -12 or something like that.
Really?
Yep. Very livable, but, chilly.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So anyway,
okay.
Sorry.
I'm fine with
Proceed.
that. Yeah, let's do that. That solves lots of problems. All right, I'm in. But yeah, there's another one. In December 2011, NASA confirmed that there was a 600 light year away planet called Kepler 22b. It's about 2.4 times the radius of Earth,
yes.
And it's probably the closest match we have yet to Earth in both weight and temperature. So it's the same weight,
mass, and temperature.
Sorry, yes, mass. It's the same mass and temperature. So it's likely that there would be, if there was life there, that it'd be, somewhat similar. It's terrestrial. It's not going to be some crazy water monster or some gas monster. It's very, very like us. So I think that's an exciting possibility as well.
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, as of June 27th, there have been 899 extrasolar planets found.
Sorry, say that again.
As of June 27th, 2013, there have been 899 extrasolar planets discovered.
Wow, that's fantastic.
As opposed to the 0 10 years ago or so.
Yeah.
So yeah, we, like I talked about, we don't have, there's plenty of stars out there, and we can't detect nearly as many stars or planets around those stars as we should be able to, but we've got plenty of time. So
yeah, and
we'll keep on plugging.
Yep, even though the Kepler is nearing the end of its life. I don't know if you heard about that, did you?
Yeah, I did. There's been trouble.
Yep, one of the wheels on a primary mirror has been, I don't know, broken, or it's not moving or something like that, so it can't adjust properly.
You know who did it?
Wakefield?
Aliens.
Oh, aliens. Of course.
Yeah, it was aliens. They don't want us to discover them, clearly.
Well, that's something we'll talk about soon. But first, I mentioned SETI before. And that's the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And it typically refers to the search for radio transmissions that are sent to us by aliens. So, it's a program that's put on, and they hire a bunch of time on radio telescopes, and they point them at places where they think aliens might be, and they listen. And that's pretty much it. They just listen. It technically includes any number of methods for searching for life elsewhere. It's a common misconception that they just focus on radio waves. They, in fact, use a variety of methods. But government funding was withdrawn in 1995, and it's currently funded privately.
Shame.
Yeah. Radio signals were chosen as a major focus because radio frequencies penetrate the atmosphere very well, making it, pragmatic. As well, human activity emits a lot of radio noise, which sort of leads us to believe that aliens may as well. So the first radio broadcast the first radio wave broadcast, that was of enough strength to go a fair cosmic distance was Hitler's opening the 1930-something games in East Germany. And it's as depicted in Carl Sagan's Contact. And so ever since the mid-30s, we've been broadcasting ever-increasing radio signals out in a sphere around the planet. And it's, gradually growing outwards at the speed of light. So
it's not too far, though, right? It's going to be encompassing some stars, right? By 20 years,
we
get to Gliese 581, right?
Oh, yeah. So we would think that other planets might be doing, other alien civilizations might be doing the same sort of thing.
Now, I think you know this about me, but I don't buy it.
Of course.
I don't think that's a good way to look. I think first off, SETI wouldn't get that noise. It wouldn't pick that up. It has to be concentrated.
Well, there's some controversy about that, whether our instruments are sensitive enough to detect that. There's an issue with us not knowing how powerful these aliens' transmissions would be. One draw is that artificial signals are very easy to identify because they have a very narrow bandwidth and a repetitive nature.
Yeah, well, that's what they thought that when they first found pulsars, they found aliens, right?
Yep, that's exactly it.
But guess what? Pulsars are huge, emitting a massive amount of radio waves.
That's true.
I don't buy it.
Well, maybe you'll like this. Apart from the radio, some researchers think that aliens use lasers at optical wavelengths for communications. So they look for lasers.
They look for that?
Sorry?
They look for that?
Yeah. It's difficult, though, because lasers only operate on a single wavelength. It'll be like, 562 nanometers.
Yeah.
And that'll be the wavelength, and they can only look for that wavelength, whereas with radio, you can sort of sweep through a whole bunch of wavelengths at once.
I see. Okay, that makes sense then. Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, radio obviously is easy, but it's not good. I think the primary way we should look for things is the Dyson spheres, which you disagree with fervently.
No, I don't. I don't at all. In fact, that's
Oh.
part of SETI. SETI.
Yeah, no, I understand it's part of SETI.
Oh.
I just thought you were against it.
Well, I think it's about as feasible as, the radio transmissions.
Okay. See, I think it's more likely. The Dyson sphere was originally coined by Freeman Dyson, not the vacuum guy. He's still alive. He's 89 years old, and he's a mathematician and philosopher.
What a guy.
And he said one should expect that within a few thousand years, in entering the stage of industrial development, any intelligent species should be found occupying an artificial biosphere which completely surrounds its planet star. A Dyson sphere doesn't necessarily just refer to the collection of energy. It can refer to things like protection from asteroids and things like that.
Basically a large object that...
Yeah, exactly. You're making a sphere around your
star.
Your star, right. So the idea is to put a whole bunch of solar panels or something, an analog to solar panels around that, and then you collect almost all of the light that comes off of your star.
Mm-hmm.
And this is recognizable. We can find, we know that it would probably re-radiate heat at about 300 Kelvin. So, we could be easily able to detect exactly how much, or which things are Dyson spheres and which things are not. We'd be able to see that, okay, that star, we can tell the temperature of something from a distance. We can look at it with our telescopes and tell the temperature. So it's either a star or maybe it's a Dyson sphere, right?
Yep.
So I don't think this is the case, but I saw one explanation for dark matter referring to Dyson spheres.
Oh.
No light coming through, but lots of it doesn't check out.
No,
it doesn't at all. But I thought that was a fun thought.
It's interesting. SETI encompasses the search for Dyson spheres. It's part of their search for extraterrestrial artifacts, which looks for objects like automated alien exploration spacecraft, or they look for advanced technology using techno-signatures, which is what you're talking about, looking for Dyson spheres, looking for the characteristics of something that, we would anticipate that aliens would come up with. But see, that's what I kind of don't agree with. I just think it's a little bit far-fetched to say that, oh, yes, I think that aliens would definitely have built these Dyson spheres. It seems a little far-fetched to me.
Well, I'm not saying I know what color it is. I'm just saying it's probably something, like that.
I'm on the fence.
I kind of agree with Freeman Dyson here. I think it's kind of an inevitable thing. We're going to need power. We clearly need more power, right? So, I don't know. Well, we can agree to disagree, but...
Yeah. All right, so Fermi's paradox is a question that drives at, it's sort of in answer to the Drake equation. And the ultimate conclusion of the Drake equation for most people is that there's probably life somewhere based solely on the fact that there are an absurd amount of stars, an absurdly large universe with an absurd amount of planets, with an absurdly high chance of life somewhere in the universe other than us. So Fermi's paradox is the question, well, if there's all this life, then where is it? Why haven't we seen any of it? So...
And like we talked about in our beginning segment, some people think it's right here, but...
Yes, exactly. So
we don't see that.
Right. And so this is a paradox, and there are a couple of answers to it. There are a couple of standard answers. The first is that we are, in fact, alone, and we're all that there is. And that means that we're the only life in the entire universe, which is frightening. And I wouldn't put it at a high possibility. The one that I think is maybe the most feasible is that alien civilizations are common, but since the universe is so large, no one has yet colonized our galaxy. It's important to note that when you look into the sky, all the stars you see are in our galaxy, the Milky Way. Some of the dots you see are, in fact, other galaxies that have billions of stars in those galaxies. So when you look at the night sky, you're not seeing all the stars that there are. You're seeing basically just the stars that are near us. So, I mean, this is vast distances, and it may just be that no one's reached us yet.
Yeah.
Or
they have no desire to.
Yeah, well, that's the second part. That's the last standard answer, is that there are civilizations around, but they just have chosen not to reveal themselves to us for whatever reason.
The prime directive.
Could be that. And, they may not have found us. It's kind of the same thing. However, on a little more of a, fun, playful note, I've got a bunch of weird solutions to the Fermi paradox.
You've got a bunch. I see one here.
I've got a bunch.
All right. Lay them on me.
So these were taken from an author on a website, and his name is George Dvorsky. So the first is the zoo hypothesis, that we're being observed from afar for entertainment or study. Either that or we're set aside in a prime directive type deal.
Sorry, prime directive, for anybody who doesn't know, is a Star Trek reference, the idea that you wouldn't want to mess with any developing civilizations.
Yeah. Another one is the space debris hypothesis, where it's like an alien civilization, like, say, us, we will just end up trapping ourselves in a sphere of debris of satellites and stuff that we've sent into space that is just impenetrable to anything that we would try to send out. Any, spaceships or colonizing ships or anything like that. Just can't get through it because of all the junk that's up there. Another one is a self-imposed quarantine. Basically, all the aliens stay home, and they try to stay quiet out of fear of drawing attention to themselves. And you can kind of see that from Stephen Hawking's point, right? It's like,
yeah,
if we think that if an alien civilization comes here, they're going to kick our asses, then we would want to maybe,
minimize the chances of that happening.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Another one. Sorry? Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just wondering how likely you think some of these are.
I mean, the bottom line is there's no evidence for any of them. So
that's fair.
It's very speculative.
I think the space debris one's a little bit spacious, so to speak, because it. I mean, if they're sitting there like, oh, we have no solution, they'll probably come up with something if they're smart enough, right?
You'd hope so. I mean, I would hope that we would be able to.
That's what I think. That's where my thought is. I'd hope we would do that. So I think hopefully everybody else would too.
Yeah. So we'll power on through these. There's the whack-a-mole hypothesis, that we're being watched by aliens who are ready to destroy us if they don't like what they see. So there are peacekeeping aliens who have sort of put us on probation until we grow up as a civilization.
Okay.
4 is called we're made of meat. We're too different from the aliens to be relatable or interesting to them at all. It's the equivalent of, us discovering life that's sort of gaseous, and it's like if clouds were alive. Like, oh, not the cloud people. Who cares?
I think I'd care, but yeah, maybe the cloud people don't care at all.
Yeah. There's the simulation hypothesis, that we're living inside a computer simulation which was rigged such that we're the only ones. And that's,
okay, makes sense.
That's kind of I don't know. That hits on some Matrix-like
I say makes
stuff.
sense. Yeah, it's possible. I'm not saying that's likely, but it makes sense.
Yeah. There's the radio silence hypothesis, where nobody's transmitting but everyone's listening, like what SETI is doing right now. There is the possibility that the aliens are homebodies and they just aren't interested in space exploration. They just don't care at all. There's the possibility that we can't read the signs. The alien technology or the beings themselves are so radically different from us that we just can't identify when they're trying to talk to us. They could be sending messages our way all the time, and we just don't get them because we can't understand them. There's also the possibility that they're at the edge of the galaxy, large civilizations would have a great deal of waste and waste heat to dissipate, and the coolest place to do so is at the edge of the galaxy. So they would migrate there so that it's easier to dissipate all this heat from their large civilization.
What? Okay, wait. Why would... Like, we don't have that... Like, we can get rid of heat, just put it in
We're
space.
not a large civilization yet. Not in terms of galactic civilization.
Okay. So you're saying, like, I just don't get it, because we get rid of heat. Doesn't it not just get slothed away by...
Well, I'm not saying I buy into these. I'm just explaining them.
I don't buy it.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's the directed panspermia hypothesis, where aliens spark life on planets and then they just leave, and they're done. And then there's finally, the last one is the phase transition hypothesis, which basically says if the universe is still evolving, then the conditions to support life have only been around for a short while, and stuff just hasn't gotten there yet. We're basically first past the post.
Yeah, we could very well be the most advanced civilization. Everything else is caveman days or earlier. Or maybe we're the last. You never know.
Yeah.
We could be the last people ever to be there.
And, people always think of aliens as being more advanced, but I would maybe put it as more likely that, well, maybe not more likely. Based on the fact that we haven't heard from them, maybe I'd say more likely that they're less advanced than us. Maybe we'll be the ones finding, more primitive aliens. And
I think it's the same idea that people have about evolution, where they think it's a ladder, or, like you have to climb the ladder, but really it's a bush. You're not really going in any direction. It's just whatever works for you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So, yeah, I mean, making... doing science and learning things may not have been the best for species on another planet. Could have just stayed in amoeba stage.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Okay, can you imagine a world where they were just amoebas and everybody got along. There was enough energy to go around and they were fine.
Oh, they're like, oh, we're done. We're done. We solved life.
Yeah, we're fine. They're not wildly reproducing. They're just, I'm fine. It's unthinkable to me. Is that wrong?
Well, I guess that's part of the, it's part of one of these explanations, right? It's like, oh, well, I just don't understand that.
Yeah, okay. So is that the last possibility?
That was the last one I had, yeah.
All right, well, those are fun. I enjoy those.
Yeah, I like them.
I bet we could have a fun discussion about that sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about what extraterrestrial life might look like. So again, this is all speculative, right? We're talking about things we know, sample size of 1. We've got a few problems there. But I first want to talk about what they would physically look like. Not necessarily what they'd be made of or anything like that, but rather their morphology. And it may not be anything like us, like in gas or whatever, but it probably would have some of the same tropes that we have here on Earth, because we know from convergent evolution here on Earth that the same sort of adaptations can evolve several different times. Like we've got the legless lizards and the snakes. Mm-hmm. They look very similar. They have the same adaptations. They move in very similar ways, but they're different things. They didn't evolve together. They're totally separate things that came together. The small bats and the large bats, they are totally different evolutionary paths coming and meeting and looking so similar. We're confused about how they came to be in the first place. And obviously we always see people, talking about how aliens look like us. You see that in movies and stuff all the time. But and I think there's actually kind of a little bit of truth to that, based on what I've looked into different people's opinions on the matter. I think there might be some cause to think that maybe not they're humanoid, but some similar features, like the large head. We've got very large heads because we need to process more information. Mm-hmm. Any species that might want to visit us is generally what I'm talking about here, right? Anyone that would want to visit us or contact us, any civilization, would probably have a large head. They'd need some sort of prehensile appendages, some arms, legs, a tail that does things,
Something
doesn't
to
matter
grip
how many.
with.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't matter how many digits. They could have one arm. That doesn't really make sense, but I mean, something, some graspers, because that's really a big key point to our evolution as well. Mm-hmm. They need some form of input, or like sights and sounds, and things that would be able to sense their environment.
Yeah, some
Otherwise
sort of ability to interact with their environment.
otherwise they'd be rocks. They wouldn't have anything. This is even one of the this is one thing that life needs in general, right?
Yep.
It needs an input and an output, and they'd need some sort of communication, some social behavior, and some maternalism.
Probably.
I think,
Yeah,
because otherwise they wouldn't be able to transmit knowledge, and that's a really key point to building a civilization.
Good point.
Yeah, so you'd be sitting, otherwise you're dying off every generation, and whoever does the best, it doesn't matter, right? Because you're losing everything. You're starting fresh every generation, unless they live for, however long.
Which is possible.
Yeah, I thought about that when I was writing this, but I don't think it's probably likely because...
Not based on what we know about biology.
Yeah, because things that have a shorter lifespan can evolve more quickly. They would be able to get more
changes in a
quicker.
shorter amount of time.
Exactly. So something likely evolves to have a shorter lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
So that is even a shared feature we have with them, probably.
Yeah.
So again, and it would have some degree of cephalization too. So moving all of the sensory organs to one location, more forward-facing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be likely. And then that one I don't really have great justification for beyond the idea that it would be more useful in the way that I see it. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I've heard a theory that not only cephalization, but also bilateralism, that is basically symmetry on the left and right.
Yeah, think of it as like a dog and how it's split right down the middle, right?
Yes, exactly.
One nostril on one side, etc., versus a jellyfish,
right, where it's radially symmetrical. And I've heard that if you're talking about advancing, needing a brain to do so, it's better to cephalize it and have it bilaterally symmetrical because it physically shortens the distance between nerve nets.
Makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. I could see a situation where a radial animal could come up with similar adaptations, but I think cephalization does offer some key advantages.
Which is why it evolved, right?
Yeah, you're looking forwards, you're moving. You have the reason we're cephalizing was because we had to get somewhere, right?
Right.
A jellyfish floats around. We're looking forwards. We need to know what's in front of us to look out for things, right?
Yep.
A neck is another good option. Be able to turn your
and
your sensory organs.
The earliest land animals didn't have necks. And, and it was a key in their evolution because of predation.
Yeah, you didn't have too many predators. Trees aren't too much of trouble for for the Tiktaalik.
Yeah, that's true.
So, another one I wanted to talk about was carbon-based. We touched on this earlier for a moment, whether it was carbon-based, silicon-based, gas-based. Things we can't really discuss is, gas-based or, some people talk about the idea of, I forget who mentioned it. I think it might have been Stephen Hawking, in fact. The idea of beings that live in a star.
Oh, I didn't hear the star. I heard he proposed something gas-based life, basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sort of a plasma-based life form.
Okay.
Where all you really need is some degree of organization, then you can work out the rest, right?
Yeah.
As long as you have key set things, this does this and this does this, then you can turn simple rules into complicated life.
Yeah, but then that, of course, may drastically alter our definition of life.
Oh, certainly. This is why I didn't really touch on this.
Right.
I didn't want to really look into something that's so broad and so unknown. We've been discussing things that are fairly unknown.
Well, we'd be speculating entirely. We have no expertise or special knowledge in this.
I think the other option, other than carbon-based life, like we are, and every other piece of life we found, is the silicon-based life. It's got a lot of similar properties to carbon-based life, and organosilicon compounds, which is sort of like organic chemistry, right? Dealing with carbon. This is dealing with silicon.
Yep.
It's much more resilient to heat and cold. So we can hold its structure much more properly.
That's interesting.
In extreme changes in heat. And so for instance, if you want a good example of an organosilicon compound, the household caulking is a organosilicon compound.
Oh.
So you can imagine something like that. Obviously not like that, but it's very resilient. It's rubbery.
Yep. And
things like that.
And it lends some credence to, harsher climates than Earth.
Exactly. We use it as weather stripping.
Yeah.
Kind of an ideal example right there.
Yeah.
But I think carbon's still more likely, obviously because it's so much more abundant.
And far more versatile as well.
Yeah, as far as we know.
Yeah.
We've seen so many examples of things you can do with carbon, basically anything.
Yeah.
We'll have to do a carbon show.
Of course.
But yeah, now the other one I want to talk about was DNA. Would it have DNA? We see DNA now with thiamine, adenine, guanine, and cytosine.
Yep.
The four chemicals that really hold the code of life.
Yep. The nucleic bases.
Yeah, and then again RNA as well with the uracil, and we see organisms that don't use DNA on Earth; they use just RNA,
right,
for transcription. But obviously, DNA is preferable because it's so much more solid.
Well, it depends. It depends.
Oh, really?
I wouldn't want to say that DNA is preferable. It depends on what you're using it for, as always.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. So I mean, there are other nucleotides.
Yes.
There are tens of other nucleotides that we know of.
Yep.
And we can you could swap them out for many of the other nucleotides that we use in our DNA, and it would work fine.
Yep. It just so happened that
exactly
we got the ATCG.
So yeah, say our predecessors are the tiny little life that was figuring out DNA for the first time. It was like, oh, these things are nearby. There's a lot of them. I'll use these. And then some other guy's like, oh, I'm going to use the ones that aren't as abundant. And then the one who's got a lot was going to live more, or is going to reproduce more. Because
he's certainly not going to run out of DNA.
Exactly. There's more building blocks to work with. So that's really what it comes down to, the distribution of those. Obviously, it's going to need some code. It has to pass down genetics. It could be something we can't even think of. It could be even, I suppose it could be like just a polypeptide, a protein.
Yeah, potentially. There are,
anything that's ordered.
There are innumerable ways that we could, all you need to do is pass on some sort of self-replicating, I hesitate to use the word information, but it's suitable in this sense, I suppose.
Yeah, it's information that we get because we're perceiving it.
Right. And, the ones that Mackie just described, you just described the DNA, RNA, and polypeptides, that's just looking at what's active in life on Earth as we know it. Those are the three main molecules that are used to transmit information. But, I mean, I'm sure you could come up with, like, just thinking off the top of your head, you could come up with, a couple of candidate molecules that would be able to transmit information in their structure, because that's how the polypeptides and nucleic acids do that. So let's do a quick sum up of our episode, unless you have something more to say.
No, I think I'm good.
All right. So we opened talking about, alien abduction stories and, why people think this and all this stuff. Mackie and I, you and I both agree that we don't think that aliens have ever contacted the planet.
Right.
However, I think that it's very possible and probable even that life of some kind exists somewhere in the universe.
I agree with that as well.
Perfect. So, I mean, we've sort of outlined our reasons why we think all these things. Obviously, anyone who's listening is free to come to their own conclusions.
And contact us with them?
Yes, absolutely.
mindthegaphosts@gmail.com.
Perfect. And now I'd like to move in to our game section, our fun section. Even though this whole podcast is fun, right, Mac?
I was just talking the other day. Anything labeled fun is likely not fun.
Then we'll call it the game section.
All right.
First, I'll open with a challenge, and we'll do this every week, and I think we're calling it our 5-minute challenge.
Yep.
So, in the 5-minute challenge, I'm going to challenge Mackie to learn as much about a subject in 5 minutes of research. Only 5 minutes as possible. And then next week we'll talk about it in our game section. So today I'm going to challenge Mackie, and next episode he'll challenge me. So, Mackie, I challenge you to learn as much as possible about the hyoid bone in 5 minutes.
Okay. I can do that.
All right. And we'll hear that next episode. Now, for our main game section, I've got a quiz for you, Mackie.
Okay.
I went on the sketchiest alien conspiracy sites the internet has to offer, and I made the following trivia quiz. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
All right, question 1. Which of the following is not a type of alien that regularly visits Earth? A, the Greys. B, the hairy dwarves. C, amorphous gelatinous. Or D, very tall race, or VTR.
Okay. Well, if it's got an acronym, it's got to be true.
Okay.
It's an initialism. But I gotta say the dwarfs. Sounds made up to me.
All right.
Yep.
You are incorrect.
Oh, crap. Well, what is it?
The Greys are supposedly from the Rigel star system, 4 feet tall, typical alien appearance, large slanted eyes, etc., and they worship technology. The hairy dwarves are allegedly 4 feet tall, weigh about 35 pounds, they're red-haired.
How does anybody know this, or supposed to know this?
They're neutral in terms of the whole, I guess, galactic politics, and they're respectful of intelligent life. The amorphous gelatinous, I just made up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I should have known.
Yeah.
Sounds about too biology-y.
Yeah. And the very tall race are similar to us in appearance, but are 7 to 8 feet tall, and are allied with another type of alien called the Swedes.
Really? I think I've been on this website, actually.
Oh, really?
Were there a lot more?
Yeah. There were a lot
Okay.
more.
Was there reptiles?
Oh, I can't remember.
Okay, I could have swore I've been on this website, because I remember reading a lot about this and having a laugh.
Yeah, it's funny.
All right.
All right, question 2. Which of the following is not an alien classification? And you'll understand that when I give the options. So,
Okay.
A, intruders or malevolents. B, attractors or seducers. C, interactors. Or D, neutrals.
Well, we know neutrals are a thing.
All right.
And sorry, what were the first three again? Or?
A was intruders or malevolents. B was attractors or seducers. And C was interactors.
Okay, I think that the second one, that's nonsense.
All right. You are correct.
Nice. All right.
The intruders or malevolents are dangerous because they don't respect our society. I just made up attractors and seducers. Interactors interfere with us and our history and make changes when possible. And the neutrals, as you might guess, are just observant and never interfere.
Well, those are the space dwarves, right?
Yes, exactly.
Good. At least I'm an expert in something like this now.
Yeah.
Great.
The next one is not a multiple choice. You're going to have to just tell me.
Okay.
What objects in the solar system are aliens purported to maintain bases on?
The moon, Mars, and orbiting the sun.
You got one of them right.
Drat. Okay, that's what I would do.
The Earth and the moon are the two. So there's supposed to be an alien base on Earth.
Oh, well, I mean...
They're
I can see
among us.
Okay. Well, I don't think so. That's Area 51 right there.
Oh, yeah. That's it.
We'll talk about that in our conspiracy episode.
Fun.
All right.
Question 4. Name 3 of the most common areas examined by aliens.
Common areas.
Yeah.
Areas of the body?
Yeah. What do you probe?
Back of the neck. The rectal area. And the mouth.
You got none of them.
What?
Sorry. All right.
I saw a House episode. I don't know.
So this is the most commonly reported. The nasal cavity, ears, eyes, genitalia. I can kind of see the rectum in that. And the navel in females only. That's very strange to me. So, there you go.
Okay.
Question 5. Aliens are very concerned with breeding and crossbreeding of humans. Can you guess the genetic combinations they use?
The genetic combinations.
Yes.
You mean like...
So, what gamete of which species do they add? I've
almost always seen it that they always add the sperm.
All right. So that is one of them is alien sperm plus female egg.
Yep.
All right.
And then I guess it would be egg and egg.
Nope. You've
No?
also got a male sperm and a female egg, but it's a specifically chosen male. So two humans, but the aliens are breeding a superior race.
Ah, I see.
And
Nazi aliens from space.
Exactly.
All right.
And finally, a male hybrid sperm, which is a combination of the alien sperm plus the female egg and the male sperm plus the female egg.
Oh.
Plus
okay.
female eggs.
Sorry, you expected me to guess these.
No. Well, maybe one of them.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the 3. That last one is especially kind of crazy. And I don't think these people have ever taken genetics classes because, I mean, you can't even form a viable zygote with, our most related evolutionary ancestors, like, a gorilla or a bonobo or something.
Do you have first-hand experience?
No, but I'm told. I'm told by people who've tried it.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Question 6. Which of the following is not a major indicator of alien interaction? A. An inexplicable desire to consume raw eggs. An inexplicable improvement in physical condition. Missing time or feelings of anxiety upon viewing images of aliens or alien technology. So which of those is not an indicator?
Now, see, I want to say 1, but I've heard raw meat before, and I've never heard raw eggs. That's why I'm thinking, and I know a few of the other ones I've seen, so I want to say that it's the first one, the raw eggs.
That is correct.
Didn't say the right reasoning as well?
No, I just made it up.
Oh, see, I've heard raw meat before. Okay. Good call.
Yep. And finally, last question. Which of the following is not a medical anomaly which results from alien interaction, reportedly?
Yeah.
A. Artery in the wrong place. B. A baby with an unusual appearance. C. The sudden development of ESP. Or D. A dramatic increase in bone density.
Okay. So the first one was the artery in the wrong place.
Right.
I can definitely see somebody getting abducted, going in, and then they find out that they just have a heart abnormality. So I can see that happening. B was a baby, right?
Yeah, a weird-looking baby.
I feel like there's a lot of reproductive obsession in this whole culture. So I think that's there. What was C again?
C was the sudden development of ESP, or extrasensory perception.
And D was the
dramatic increase in bone density.
Okay, see, now I think I've seen a Bones episode on the last one there. So I think it must be C.
So you think that
I think D is tied in with the whole astronauts losing bone density thing.
Okay.
So I think C is the one that's out.
Okay. You're incorrect. I made up the bone one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I think it's a dramatic decrease in bone density.
That would make sense.
Is what
I
was
just
reported.
Thought, aliens bring you on board, they give you something to make your bones not go away, whatever, fill in an explanation there.
Hey, we could write an alien abduction story.
Didn't we?
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, go on. Is that it? Or
yep, that's all
cool.
I got. So
what was that, 6 questions?
7 questions.
What an odd number of questions. I was expecting a round number, 10, 5.
Well, I was writing them, and then I started hitting my head off the desk at how crazy the site was. So
okay. You wait for the round number next week with my quiz.
Oh, goody.
Well, we're talking about next week is ASMR.
Do you want to explain what that is?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay, do you want to explain what it is?
I guess not. We'll just wait until next week and
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, well, do you want to wrap this up then?
Yeah. So thanks for listening to Mind the Gap. This was our show called We Probed Mars and It Probed Back. Title, we have to give credit to Jessica Pause for suggesting to us. Thanks for listening. I'm Keegan Gwydolin.
And I'm Mackie Drew.
And we'll see you next time.